Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the In the 11 podcast. I'm your host, Brendan Griffiths, and this is the show where we bring on those from the world of football to show you what it takes to be in the 11 at the highest possible level. This week's guest is Alyssa Walker, a former Richmond Spider, a former Iowa Hawkeye, where she plied her trade as a collegiate soccer player, has then gone on to have an extremely successful career in Scandinavia, in Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. Each time that she's played there, she has really balled out and gotten herself a tremendous new opportunity in the season following. She gives great insight into kind of some of the behind the scenes about a professional soccer player. Really good insight and stories from her college soccer days, and it's a great episode for any of you interested in what it's like to be a big time Division One college soccer player, and also what it might be like in places like Norway and Sweden and Denmark to be a professional. Now, before I kick it over to the episode, I have to ask you one quick favor. I've been asking you for the past couple of weeks, and I have to ask you again if you're brand new here or if you haven't done it yet. The YouTube, the video episodes, we've been posting them weekly, and the channel is growing, which I greatly appreciate all of you out there who have been watching the videos there, have been checking out the shorts, and have been subscribing to the channel. So make sure, if you are watching right now, take a moment, scroll down just a bit, hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel grow massively, and I am greatly appreciative of you all doing that. So let me now kick it over to myself and Alyssa. Right, stepping in and joining us in the 11 now is Alyssa Walker, just off of a new contract signing in Denmark. And based on my experience being in Denmark for a very short time, I'm not even going to try and pronounce the name of the city in which you are in right now. I'm going to leave that to you because I'm sure people in the comments would let me know that it is incorrect. But can you tell us the club that you have just signed for and are playing with?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't even know if I'll pronounce it right, but I play for Habikö, which is in the city of Kö, it's spelled like Ko, their vowel O with the slash, so it's an and it's like 30-45 minutes outside of Copenhagen.
Oh, okay. Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
And so maybe talk to me a little bit about how this came about. I'm sure we're going to break down kind of your career and your playing history so far, but how did the move specifically from Norway to Denmark happen?
So honestly, it was a bit crazy. Just I think that my life in the past like 7-8 months have been pretty crazy, but so I was playing in Bergen, Norway for a team called SK Brann. And then I went on loan for this summer window during the World Cup. So I went on loan with the Portland Thorns
Hmm.
um, and spent like a month and a half, a couple months there. And then towards the end of my loan contract, that's when like there was like a few teams that basically started bidding on me to my sporting director in Braun. And just with the opportunity and with the club there being open to that move, and this was a really good opportunity for me. So basically, that's kind of like how it happened. So they just like made a bid and brought me here because I was only 6 months into my contract in Norway before I
Hmm.
ended up moving here. So, which like they say, like things can just kind of happen in the blink of an eye, and like I
Yeah.
I could have decided not to and to stay with like with Braun, but um I think like either way, like it would have put me in a good position. But I think like being able to come here and start a little fresh and come to another like high level team was a really good opportunity. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I have to imagine there's certainly an element of a team that really wants you and expressing that interest and sees how you can be a part of their club. Like that has to definitely mean something and get you excited about coming and joining the project. I have to ask though, like just a couple of years removed from playing college soccer, is it ever like surreal to kind of think about, there's professional clubs that are bidding for you to come and play for them? Because I don't know, just me personally, I'm like, knowing as well as a former college soccer player and knowing what that's like to compare to now a professional game, it has to be interesting, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely it's definitely interesting, and it is like you said, like it's encouraging when a team like shows interest and shows um like they're really it's almost kind of like when you're going to find a college in the first place, like they throw you this like pitch. Except I think like one of the biggest differences here is this is like it's a stationary team. Like there's not really a lot that they could lie about if they wanted to, and especially when you're bound by a contract. So like I guess that would be the difference between like um looking to go into a college versus there. Like I know college coaches that just kind of tell you everything you want to hear. And
Yeah.
it's similar in the sense that they tell you a lot of things that you want to hear, but you also like have the opportunity to like negotiate in like certain terms that like you're working with, and like that in and of itself is like it's just weird operating under your terms in a way.
Yeah.
um so yeah, it's and when anything with like money involved is just like pretty crazy in general, like moving into the professional field is like because it's your career now, so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, if we talk about a little bit, kind of rewinding the story a little bit and setting the scene for how we got to this point, maybe with your college recruiting experience, was that a theme that you kind of experienced? Was like maybe difficulty with speaking to coaches and finding the right fit for you in a program, or did you know immediately kind of Richmond was a great fit on all fronts?
Um, all of my recruiting leading up until Richmond was a bit complicated, and Richmond kind of like happened and kind of fell into place. And then when I went on my unofficial visit when I was a junior in high school, that's like when it was different than the other visits, and I felt like I could fit in, like you said, and it was for me at that moment, it was a no-brainer, but it wasn't something that I knew immediately, like going into it. Or to be honest, I didn't even know that the school existed before they had like started recruiting me. So, and then when it came into fruition, then like I just knew that that was the place that I was meant to be for the next 4 years, at least 4 years.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like you speak to something interesting when you're talking about how in the professional game you can kind of like set your own terms to a certain extent, right? Like in the same way that, as much as it's doesn't feel right to quite talk about it in this way, like if somebody is bidding on you as a player, like you kind of become an asset. So you want to make yourself valuable and go into talks with teams and kind of ask for the things that you feel like you deserve. Whereas colleges, it's a bit different because there's always a ceiling to what you can get. And I also just think it's a strange time as well, like to be 17 or 18 and making like such a huge decision like that. Do you think that was maybe part of why some of those conversations with other schools or like your recruiting process was a little bit difficult, like before deciding on Richmond?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just like a lot of moving factors when it comes into college, and I think like when you're looking into what college you want to go to, like a big priority for that has to be the education because the team is like constantly changing. So
Yeah.
like to have like the same starting 11 for like all 4 years that you're there is like very, very rare. So having all of that like come into place and knowing that there's all these moving parts, I think it teaches you to be very adaptable within that, but you can't necessarily predict how that's going to come across. So you really need to pay attention to your life outside of football and what that's going to look like, how the education is, some of the things that they have to offer you in terms of like um, obviously financial support for those who need it, and then academic support because I mean playing college sports in general is a full-time job.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to know that you're going to be doing that along with like trying to maintain your certain level of academics in order to be eligible to play. So it's kind of like back and forth in that way.
Mm.
And I think a lot of young players are given misinformation about what that college experience is supposed to look like because
Mm.
there's not really an answer of what it's supposed to look like or how it should. It's based on how you feel about it and how you're going to make the most of it. Um, so yeah, I think that's the main thing that I would say if I hit the point.
No, yeah, it is a really good point because I think you hear a lot of people try and give broad or general advice about the college process, and it's so hard to do that because every person has different goals and different things that they want to get out of college, and no two people I think are looking for the exact same thing when it comes to college. But you did mention something really interesting there, that in a lot of ways college athletics can be like a full-time job. Can you maybe like illustrate at all your experience going to Richmond and then also Iowa, how like what makes it kind of a full-time job, maybe for somebody who's out there listening and doesn't really know what the rigors of college soccer are like?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly I think of it more so in the terms of like how my life is now. And like I wake up, go to practice, do recovery stuff, eat, sleep, and like there's girls who have hobbies and there's girls who do like have a part-time job aside from that, but it's not really, you can't really play at your full potential with like doing too much of something else at this level. And I think a lot of colleges are at this level. And so like when you think about that, then you're like, okay, well, I'm have to take a full course load.
Yeah.
And then some players still have to pay. So some players even have work. And with all of that, and then you lift a lot more when you're in college than you do in the professional game, like what I've experienced so far. And so you're doing all of that. And then when you go to like bed at night, then you wake up and repeat it the next day and you just go, go,
Mm.
go. And I think when you look back at it, when you get on the other side of college, you realize like how fast that moves because you're just so busy all of the
Yeah.
time. And I think I really do compare it to like having two full-time jobs because I think, or just to put it in a analogy, is just because going to school full-time, that's also like a full-time job. And then playing sports full-time is also a full-time job. I mean, it's my full-time job now,
Yeah.
and like I'm doing the same amount or the same time commitment, so to say, towards football, probably more so because you have more time for individual stuff and you have more time for film, um, and you have more time to do like recovery lifting and things like that. But aside from that, you're pretty much like required the same amount of
Mm.
time on the field or in the gym.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, like a lot of people, specifically people who I've spoken to from Europe that want to come over and do the college experience and play, right? Like they kind of look at it as a full-time soccer environment, even though like the NCAA or like the school might not necessarily consider it that way. Like because the season's so much shorter than a professional season, it is really like that. You're training 5 times a week, plus like you said, you're also lifting, you're also doing all these other things. Like it is really a time consuming endeavor. And like you said, there's lots of people out there who go and just go and take classes, and that's enough for them to get stressed out. So it's like if you add in a whole
Yeah,
sport on top of it as well, like you can imagine how for some people thrive in it because like you said, they kind of get in that routine and they become so busy. And for some people it's a lot to try and take on all at once.
yeah, yeah, for sure. It's just a very like different life. And so I have, of the internationals that I've also like played with, especially the other Americans, we do like kind of talk about college and how we compare it and things like that. And even like some of the natives like on my team or on my team wherever I've been, like we just like kind of joke. We're like, we wonder if they could like handle it, because we're kind of, when you're in an environment that you're told that like this is how it's supposed to be and this is how it's supposed to go, and you just kind of go and do and live in that. But if you're
Yeah.
not used to it and you're not necessarily prepared for it, you just wonder if like they would want to just stop and go back home and play or something like that. And I think college can offer a lot of benefits, but um I think like even with here, some of the girls do go to school, but they don't necessarily go full time. Like they
Mhm.
take classes to where they can maintain and not be overworked or overstressed out about things.
Yeah.
And another thing you mentioned about the season in general, when they look at it and they see that our season for college is so short, and then when you know like exactly what it is, it's really not short. It's a lot of games.
Yeah, that's
You
true.
play in a college season, say like 20 games, and we're playing I don't know exactly how many games we'll play here, but in Norway we had 27 games, but that's over the span of the year. Plus
Yeah.
you have like the cup games and Champions League games and things like that, obviously, that like can add on to it. But like we hate playing 2 games in a week. Like it's awful. It's terrible, like playing
Yeah.
at that level. And then I think back and I'm like, I did that for
All the
6 years,
time.
actually. Like, yeah, you just play, just on to the next game. And um, you always, that you have maybe 1 week where you only have one game during the whole season. And then you go into the spring and you still have games. Then you have
Yeah.
more of the one game of week set up. So it's a short season in terms of the season that counts, but
Yeah.
in reality, it's still all year long.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. Like, and just as a side note, I do hope that that changes and evolves at some point, just because I feel like there's so much science and data out there now that says like, athletes should not be doing that. You shouldn't be playing for those of us that are playing, let's say 90 minutes, like at that intensity. Your body isn't equipped to do that many times, that many times week over week, doing it twice a week. And like you said,
Yeah.
for those that start and play a whole season and play those 20 games, that's a lot of wear and tear on the body at a young age for a lot of players. But it also brings up an interesting point. Like I had a player on, her name's Rashida Beal. She went to Minnesota for college, and she talked about kind of the physicality of the college soccer game and the fitness testing. And like, I think it's one thing that maybe the rest of the world would be kind of shocked or even curious about. Like, do you have any stories of maybe a crazy fitness test that you had to do in college soccer, or specific sessions that you remember that were just like, I don't know, bring back nightmares?
Oh, well, yeah, for sure. I remember my freshman year in particular. We it was just a weird like setup how everything went. We went to the end of the season, and we had been doing really well, but then like towards the end we kind of tanked a little bit. Like people were just tired, things weren't
Yeah.
matching up the same way. Like you just get to the end and then I just happened to be on a team that we drop off, which that'll happen when you're playing so much. And then instead of like having that rest and recovery, because like we failed on expectations towards the end of the season, we had
Hmm.
1 week off and then we came back on the Monday after the week, and basically it was the story of like, you don't need your boots, you just need your
Oh
tennis shoes
no.
today. And there was just a bunch of different drills like set up of different types of sprints, and we did that the whole entire hour and a half practice, and just rotated. Like you had like players that after each like drill they would walk over and they would go throw up, and
Wow.
then it was just like you keep going. You had like one that's collapsing being like, I think I'm having an asthma attack, and they're like, okay, take a breath, everybody else keep going, and then once you're good get back on the line. And then it's just like, okay, this isn't fun, and this is not football or soccer. This is
No.
just torture. That's probably the craziest fitness like type thing that I've like really ever experienced. I mean, there's things like here and there where you're just running sprints to run sprints, and I think that's, I mean, just part of it.
Mm.
But in terms of fitness tests, um, I one of my coaches at the University of Richmond, he would tell like the incoming freshmen like a super like high level on the beep test, and he'd be like, "Yeah, you need to get to 45 or you need to get to 40." And then the rest of us who were there, like once we started learning that like that was the requirement for the incoming, we were like, "Well, don't you think that's gonna really like stress them out so much mentally because like they're not gonna make that."
Yeah.
And then like when you're coming in as a freshman and you don't make that, you feel like you're such a disappointment. You have so much expectations, and none of it has anything to do with your ability to play football.
No.
So it's like that's not determining if I'm a good player or not. That's just telling you that like I can run, which like okay, but like how's your touch? Like
Yeah.
you should be focusing on those things during the summer along with your workouts. Yes, you need to come in a certain level of fitness, but when it comes to the beep test, I think it's important in the sense that it's all mental. Like how are you going to push through that last 10 minutes of extra time, or I guess in college they don't do extra time, but like how are you going to push through that full 90 minutes? What happens when you get to the end of the game? That's when that mental side comes in from the beep test, I think.
Yeah.
But overall, I think that it just ends up putting like way too much stress and anxiety like surrounded around a fitness test when you should be working on your touch, on your movements, on your passes, um, coming in because you need to be able to put the ball on the back of the net at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's like it's so true. Just as you're mentioning that, I think back to like my college preseasons or the lead up into them, and it felt like there was so much anxiety just because of, even if you know you're fit, you still like want to make sure that you do okay for these tests, and like that was somehow the one thing that you were always so worried about. When it's like really we all should
Yeah.
have been more worried about, are we fit enough to play 90 minutes? Like
Yeah.
our legs gonna, still be able to complete passes and shots and dribbles at the end of, long training sessions, like rather than how many times can I go over and touch that line and then come back and touch this one, like, because it's just so non-contextual to what we have to do. It's great, and it's tough. Like I wonder if you get this too, but like being overseas, there's lots of things that people like to say is just like so typical American or America, and it's hard because it feels like that's probably one where we have to like be like, yeah, that's pretty typical American.
Yeah, you just gotta bite the bullet.
Yeah. So your 4 years at Richmond, did you? So I know you played a fifth year at Iowa. Was that was that a COVID year that you kind of extended to go and transfer there?
Yeah, so I actually did 5 years at Richmond, and then I had a
Okay.
sixth year. So I had an injury
Wow.
year
A
and
lot of
COVID year.
pool.
Yes, I played a lot of college. Um, and then yeah, like when I transferred to Iowa, I think it was 2021 was when I was there, and that was my final year of eligibility.
Gotcha. Throughout your college experience, was it always kind of your goal to play at the professional level and move on to the next level, or did that come later on in the process?
So I always like just like any other kid when you're going into it and you're like, yeah, I want to play professionally. Like I want to keep playing, I want to keep doing what I'm doing. And then when I came in as a freshman and sophomore in college, I kind of just coasted a little bit. I just like felt like I was good enough. Not necessarily like consciously, but like I wasn't necessarily doing the things that you would need to do in order to take it to the next level. And then I got injured my junior year, or right before my junior year, um, with some freak thing. It's called popliteal artery entrapment syndrome, which no one's gonna know what that is, but it's like compartment syndrome basically. So I had to get surgery on both my legs, had to sit out that year, and that was like a huge like mental and physical like just rewiring, because it
Yeah.
made me like sit back and think like, what do I want to do? Like, what do I want to continue pursuing? um, how much do I actually love this game to make it something that I'm willing to sacrifice these things in order for it to become my full-time job?
Hmm.
And then after, and I mean, I went through a roller coaster within that because I'm like, okay, I don't think I can do it. And then I was like, okay, no, I can do it. And then I started getting back into it, and it was really rough at first. And then, like, on the other side of it, I just realized how much I missed soccer and how bad, like, I wanted to play again. And so when I started getting back into it again, I started doing all of those extra things and getting in those extra lifts and getting in those extra sessions and really focusing like on my mental and the things that I needed to focus on in order to just continue to improve as a player. And then when I came back my senior year, that was my best year at Richmond. Um, and then going into fifth year, it was still the same thing. I just like had hit a stride at that point of just continuing to develop and continuing to take steps forward. Um, and it's same thing like at Iowa. Like once I got there, at first I was like, okay, I these girls are so much better than me. What am I gonna do? Like this is this kind of like it for me if this is as good as I can get. And then it was the same thing, just staying on that mentality of doing the extra work and taking the extra step and continuing to develop. And um, then after, like towards the end of the season, looking at myself like again and being like, okay, can I really do this? Because that's what I wanted at that point. Ever since injury, that's what I had set my sights on. And then I did it.
When you are in that injury period, I know you said it was a roller coaster of emotions, and I can definitely resonate with that as well. I think for anyone who's dealing with especially a serious or long-term injury that requires surgery, it's really hard to be forced out of the thing that you love doing. Is there like a moment where you think maybe about stopping playing altogether, or like is it always that you kind of in the back of your mind have that resolve and that desire to get back out on the pitch and do what you love and try and go to the highest level you can?
I think with the time that I had to prepare and like think made it a little bit better. I think if it was like my senior year or something like that, it probably would have been a different story.
Hmm.
Um, because like I did go back and forth and being like, okay, like can I keep going? But what if I can't? It's I never really had the idea of that I don't want to. It was just what if I can't?
Yeah.
What if I'm not good enough? What if I don't make it to that next step? Then what? And every time I would ask myself that question, I was like, well, I don't want to do anything else. This is what I want to do. This is what I've set my sight on. And so I'm going to shoot high and just keep going until I no longer have that drive or that passion towards the game anymore. And so that's just, I think, the main thing that I kept focusing on when I would have like that dip, and that roller coaster and that drop and just being back into the mental. It's just, I kept asking myself like those more so negative questions and being like, I don't think I can do this. Or what if I can't do this? Then what am I going to do? Like, what is my plan B? What is, um, and as much as that like stressed me out, like I've always been able to figure it out. But at the same time, it also kind of scared me, I think, being like
Hmm.
completely honest, of being like, if I didn't have football anymore, then like what what do I have or what do I want? And because there wasn't anything else that I wanted that bad, I a lot of the time I just kind of ignored it, and I was like that, well, that's fine because I'm going to have football and I'm just going
Yeah.
to keep working in that way. And I think like there's a little bit of that fear instilled too of being like, well, I can't fail because this is it. So yeah, it's a pretty crazy, and I think everybody's thoughts and emotions regarding around it are a little bit different. And I honestly, like, I had such a great support group that I think a lot of people say, I'm going to play professionally. I want to play professionally. And then that's just what they do, and that's it. And I made a very deliberate effort to tell like those people around me, those trusted people, what I wanted to do. So they knew exactly how to push me and how to support me in that way. So even when there's days where like I couldn't necessarily get myself back up on top mentally, that they
Mm-hmm.
would be there to support me and support that journey. And my trainer back home, we talk about this a lot actually, and just in terms of a player in general, how we use the phrase, it takes a village to raise a kid, but at the same time, it takes a village to train a player. And I do think that there's players that can completely go out and do that on their own, and they just have that mentality to just go out to the field and go do things like on their own all the time. I never really had that. Like, I always wanted to play, but I always wanted to play going like out with somebody, whether that was my
Yeah.
trainer or whether that was like friends or anything like that. I always wanted to get out on the field in that way. And I think even that like kind of made me insecure sometimes, because I was like, well, what kind of professional am I if I don't go out to the field right now and kick the ball around? What kind of um, if I'm not killing myself every workout on my own, then what kind of professional am I? And I just like had a lot of conversations with her about that. And she was just like, there's nothing wrong with that as long as you're setting yourself up in the environment that suits you best. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's the same thing when I go back home. I always go back up to Richmond where my trainer is, and I train with that group, and I do our individual sessions and things like that in order to keep pursuing that goal and continuing to get better. And that village has never like tanked. If anything, the village is growing so much more because of like those like kind of players that come in and they want that same thing and they want to be pushed and driven, whether they can do that on their own or not. They know that they can come there and they're going to get better.
Yeah. Yeah, you bring up a lot of amazing points in there. Like, and I think first is I wanted to speak to the fact when you talked about, and you're like your sophomore year, like that kind of fear of the what if. And I think that's a feeling that I know a lot of players can really relate to, myself included. Um, that fear of what if football is gone. And it takes players a long time to get to a point where they can start to figure out what life would look like without football or beyond football. And it's a hard thing. So I definitely don't think that you're alone in that at all. And kind of like you said, the that fear can maybe for a lot of people be a driving factor and then like a driving force into pushing you towards your goals and pushing you towards achievement and accomplishment and doubling down on the training and stuff like that. So the thing though that I like when you speak about the village is I think I agree with you. Where I maybe differ a little bit is I don't know if it's really possible for a player to just completely do it on their own, because I look at like how hard something like this is that we do, and in a lot of ways you do feel like you are on your just completely own journey, because you're always faced with so much adversity, right? Like we always feel like there's some coach that's telling us that we're not good enough for this level, or this person is telling us that we can't do this. And like you just feel kind of like there's a lot of factors that are working against you. And whatever that village may look like for you, I feel like there has to be at least, whether it's one or two people that make up that village, whether it's a trainer that's supporting you, whether it's a family member or a former teammate that believes in you, even if it's something just as simple as that, even if, like you said, you're the type of person who can be super disciplined in the way that you work out and the way that you train, and you can do that all on your own, that's one thing. But there has to be also like that support and that belief, because your belief is going to dip sometimes in your own ability, and your own confidence levels are going to go down. So but I like it the way that you kind of describe it there. Like, it's also about figuring out what's just the best village for you. Like if you figured out, hey, when I go and train with this group, I know that I get the most out of myself on the fields, just personally. Like, this is the group where it's best for me. Then, lean into those villages that are going to help support you, because the journey out there is going to be difficult. So you might as well like utilize the villages that are really going to help you and support you to the maximum potential. No, I was just going to say, I was going to ask about, obviously that lays out a little bit of your time in Richmond and then makes that connection with that training group now to Richmond. But the experience of you going to Iowa and kind of facing that adversity in the beginning, but then like going on to have success, was that like that, I guess, springboard into the professional game, like the thing that kind of coming out of Iowa gave you confidence into going to the professional world?
Yeah, I would say definitely. I mean, moving from a mid-major to a Power Five school, the level increased quite a bit. And then being in that environment and being able to thrive in that environment, just that alone gave me like more confidence in knowing that like even if I was to come into a team and be at the bottom of the team or anything like that, like I knew that I could make it work and develop within that.
Hmm.
Um, just being in that environment that makes you want to push and want to do more and get more. I think when you're in some environments that once you've reached that cap, that doesn't necessarily mean that you've peaked as a player, but maybe the environment around you has peaked for you. And
Hmm.
so it's time to move into a new environment. And that's not always, I think, the level. I think that that can be the social aspect around. I think that sometimes, in order to get the most out of yourself as a player, is when you kind of get that vibe, so to say, around you that it's things just aren't meshing up. And you've done things, you've tried things, and knowing that in order for you to continue to develop, sometimes you do need to change environments.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yes. I think that's like the main thing I would say. Sorry if I go on random tangents. My ADHD kicks in sometimes and has a mind of its own.
That's okay. That's okay. I think it's a really good point. Like there's all these factors that go into a footballer's career, and sometimes complacency can kind of be a detriment to your development and you progressing in your career. And whether that's, like you said, whether that's on the pitch, whether that's maybe you're too comfortable in some other aspect of kind of your footballing journey, like sometimes you need to continue to push yourself outside of that comfort zone. And I have to imagine, leaving Iowa and then going to the professional world, like that's kind of the biggest step outside of the comfort zone. And I'm always so curious too for players, like when you have that goal to be a professional and you finish your senior year, like how do you even tackle this goal? Like, how do you go about it? Like, what's step one? Or how do you get from leaving Iowa to pen to paper on that first contract?
Um, that I've learned in of itself that it's also very different for everybody in terms of their experience. I think it can be quite difficult to find a suitable agent that is going to look out for your interests and also that you know that while you are an international overseas, if that's what it is. I think it's different if you're an American looking to play in America because you have a little bit more support and comfortability with whether that's family or friends or whatever. But when you're going overseas, there's a lot of insecurity that can come along with living in a new country.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's the hardest part is really finding that agent that suits you. And in reality, you don't really need an agent for your first contract. It helps if you don't know anyone, if you don't have any contacts, if you don't know people who are playing overseas. Um, I know there's a really great group now called the Players Network, and a lot of that's just athletes supporting athletes in a sense and supporting like overseas and asking for resources and stuff like that because there's not enough reliable agents, especially on the women's side.
Mm,
But I think the first step upon coming to the end of your season, at least, and in some cases, probably should start it before the end of your season,
mm-hmm.
is creating that highlight tape um, and seeing like how that looks. My mom actually made mine, which was so fun and crazy, but she was kind of the one who was pushing full send on the other end. And like I had my old coaches and things like that tell me that they would help me make a highlight tape and find the right things. And my mom just like jumped the gun and she just started making it. So, and it was really good. She had sent it to my coaches and stuff and they approved. And so, I was very grateful for that. But I don't know about other players in general, but I think that would have made the end of my season a bit stressful if I had to do that on top of like focusing on the next game because that was the most important thing coming up is doing everything that I could within that season. And then once making that highlight tape at the end, it was all ready to go
Yeah.
entering my last game. And then after the game, it was pretty much because that's when the transfer windows start opening is that
Mm-hmm.
November, December, January like time. And then you have the draft. My year, the draft was in December, I believe. So it was, and I think it's normally in January, but don't hold me to that. I'm not quite sure. But because it was earlier, that was another thing that I wanted to make sure it was done for. Uh, Everything was all planned and ready to go. And my first contract that I signed with Sweden came like mid November. So it was only like 2 weeks after the season had ended. And if I didn't have my
Wow.
highlight tape and I didn't start thinking about these things, there's no way that I would have been able to get into something that quickly and also get into something that quickly with knowing that there's so many other things that you need to pay attention to or look into, like the area that you're
Yeah.
going to be living in, like the terms of your contract, how you're going to negotiate those terms being fresh, and especially if you don't have an agent. I was very fortunate to I didn't have an agent, but I had played with a player who's currently on the team in Sweden, and they had just promoted into the first league in the Damallsvenskan and they were looking for attackers. And because I knew her, basically, I was able to get the contact of the sporting director and send him my highlight tape and things like that. And even with that, because there was no what he would claim to be like proof of competency, it
Gotcha.
was just that um, coming like out of college, they don't really know a lot about college out here.
Mm-hmm.
They'll get one college player that's at maybe a lower level school that and or even if it's a high level player but they just don't necessarily fit into the environment as easily, that can kind of taint their idea of college in general, which
Yeah.
is interesting to me just because there's so many different
Yeah.
levels and there's so many different, yeah, so it's like it's pretty crazy to me that they don't know at least like the top like colleges or anything about that. Um, but because of that, he basically, and it went through the papers the whole entire year that I was a gamble player. That they were just like, you know what? She's fast. Apparently, she can score. Whatever. She knows someone here, so she'll fit in enough to where it'll be fine. So like, let's just try it out, see what we can do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then it ended up working out. And so that opportunity of itself is kind of what set me up and set me in stride into these next two contracts that I've been on. But it really, at the end of the day, I wouldn't take away me as a player versus some of these other players that are coming out of college. Is it like there's a huge difference between like my level and their level? I just think that I think I got lucky. It was the right place, the right time,
Yeah.
and I think there's a lot of players that could have done the same thing that I did, but I was just fortunate to know somebody who was in the game. And a lot of that is in the professional game, it's about who you know.
Yeah.
So expanding like your village, so to say, or
Mhm.
your contacts and stuff in that way can be a huge benefit for a player.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Right place, right time is really valuable in this process, and players can often act as that agent for you because if they are in good standing with their club and they, provide a good recommendation, that can really go a long way with a coach or a sporting director. And that's, I think a lot of players would be surprised at how often that is more so the like first step to someone getting a contract rather than an agent doing all the work, and sometimes it can honestly
Right.
be a little bit smoother that way than if an agent gets involved. But I know you mentioned you were speaking about the draft as well. Was that kind of something that was on your radar for that year, or did you know pretty early on, okay, I kind of want to go the Europe route, and I'm having some, good conversations?
Yeah, a big part of playing professionally for me was also being able to travel and explore more of the world. And that didn't take away the draft from me, so to say. I was still going to put my name in the draft and I was still going to go through the process. My contract with Sweden just came before that. And when I was talking to my like mentors and trainers and things like that, on whether I should sign the contract or not, like there's like a chance I could have negotiated and said, "Can we wait till after the draft?" But then at the same time, that would also decrease the ability for me to maintain that contract, especially with them considering me a gamble. So he gave me about a week, I think, to make a decision. And after that, I had just decided that I thought that that was the best opportunity for me. And
Mm,
some of the cons of going into the NWSL right off the bat is it's great to get drafted. It's a really good accomplishment or milestone in playing professionally, but it doesn't guarantee you a contract.
yeah.
So there's a lot of insecurity within that. Even though you do get drafted, you are given a really great opportunity to be able to get into the environment and prove yourself. But this opportunity for me in Europe, I had a contract. Like I had a year to basically figure it out and be able to prove myself versus having 3 months of not getting paid at
Yeah.
all to play and try to like prove yourself, and move into a brand new place and just kind of flying by the seat of your pants, but also without getting paid. That's like a really hard thing to do unless you have the financial support of family, or because you're not going to want to work a job while doing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's just a lot more security. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions about European football in general for women. And I think a lot of that has been highlighted in the previous World Cup of how much it's developing and how quickly it's developing. And so, even with that, like when I came in, I thought that the level was going to be lower than the NWSL level was. Honestly, I didn't even know I didn't have the true comparison until I went to play in the NWSL this summer. And I
Hmm.
think that both levels are very high. I just think they offer different type of value in terms of the style of play and things like that. And your strengths and weaknesses, I think, can compete in both ways. But um, yeah, I think more people should kind of look to play in Europe. There's a lot more opportunities, and the level is not like we kind of think it is based on just viewing it, it's actually a lot better and a lot higher than we expect. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like you were just saying there, especially you see it with the World Cup, like it's rapidly growing and developing. So there's almost a part, I'm sure, that's like kind of getting in maybe in the earlier stages of that, rapid growth of the leagues is probably like an exciting time to be playing in Europe, especially too, like I know you mentioned before, having the opportunity to play Champions League and get to play against some of the giants of European football. I'm sure has to be another positive of just putting yourself in the European environment. When you first came to Sweden, I know you mentioned a little bit about like the security versus insecurity of different moves, right? And one thing that's maybe tough about moving to a place like Sweden is it's like maybe a little bit of a culture shock or just a lot of things that you have to kind of figure out and adjust to all at once. Was that the case for your move to Sweden, or was it pretty like seamless in joining the club?
I think at first it was like pretty seamless in joining the club. There's not really a lot I thought about from the beginning. Things seemed to be moving well, moving in and everything was fine. And it was definitely very helpful knowing somebody on the team previously. And I think it was also very helpful is because it was a fairly new team. There was a lot of new players.
Hmm.
And with that, when you're kind of all just like thrown into a pile and said, figure it out, you start leaning on each other a little bit more when it's different when a team's kind of already stationed themselves as far as being an international. When you come into that, people kind of already have their way of doing things and like basically that kind of environment. And it's a little bit different coming into an environment versus building an environment together.
Mm.
So everybody's put on the same level, you're given the same amount of opportunity from the beginning. And I think that also made the transition a little bit easier as well, is because we're all trying to prove ourselves at once versus if you go onto a team that's stationary and that's been there, then a lot of the players have already made their mark and proved themselves, and you have to figure out how to fight your way into that. Um, there's definitely things that I had learned along the way in Sweden. And I was very fortunate to have other players, well, fortunate and unfortunate, have other players that were going through some of the same issues that we had been experiencing. And so it came to where the whole team was basically just kind of fighting for what was right. And while also still maintaining a high level, I think if each player had tried to fight that individually, or there was only one or two people that were going through it, I think it would have made the overall experience it would still affect the team, I think, but especially for those individuals, I think it would have made it a lot harder. And we just like, it was just, we had some money issues and coming in as an
Mm.
international and having something with money issues, it's like, well, I can like buy my food tonight, right? That's like fine. And it was never that bad, but it's still like when you're making borderline the minimum of what you have to make in order to get a visa in the country, it's a little bit above poverty, but it's
Yeah.
not a lot when you're starting out. So,
Yeah, yeah, it's if you have the conception that any professional footballer is making millions of dollars, then I would encourage anyone out there listening to kind of change that. There's, and this is across the men's game as well. Like there's a really small percentage of players at the top level that are making a lot of money, but the vast majority are not. And so it is hard, especially when that like is maybe in limbo in certain weeks or certain months. Like, I've spoken to tons of players, I'm sure you have as well, that it's like, with certain clubs, okay, the money comes, but maybe it comes a week late, or maybe 2 weeks late, or oh, it wasn't the full amount. Now I have to go talk to somebody, or maybe it doesn't come for a while. Like there are really difficult stories with that, and like you said, when you're in a foreign country and you're counting on that money to be able to still put food on your table, it can get to be a scary thing. And I know you don't necessarily have to go into too much detail about that, but was then the time of kind of moving from Kalmar to Braun, I wouldn't go as far to say breath of fresh air, but was it just nice maybe to kind of new change of scenery, new club, new culture, new country? Like, did that move kind of bring about some excitement for you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, following the end of the season in Sweden, because of some of the issues that we had, a lot of the players had ended up leaving. And I had re signed to extend for a year that summer, pretty much before everything started like happening. So it was a bit frustrating going into the next year at first, thinking like, okay, like I've been told it's going to be better and I hope it is, but if it's not, then you just kind of have to figure it out. And then during that break, it was a very encouraging like time for me too, as like other teams started looking at me. And then when finally like it was, I mean, the whole entire winter break was a big roller coaster because I wanted to leave, but at the same time, if I couldn't, then I wanted to be in the right mindset to be able to still do what I needed to do and to be better. Um, and knowing that that whole environment was probably going to change again.
Mm.
And then Braun came and made an offer and were really serious about bringing me to Norway. And so when it literally happened in 24 hours. Both of these have happened in a short period of time, but
Wow, that's
and
insane.
then when that happened, I had to pack up everything and then moved to Norway pretty much the next day, and then joining in on the team and stuff. It was definitely. I would say like how you explained it. It was a breath of fresh air just to be in a new environment, to be wanted again, and um, to be able to just take a step forward, I think, because it was a
Yeah.
big step forward for me as well. Especially when you do a lot of the time, like you said, players, especially with their first contract, like you have to start somewhere,
Hmm.
and starting somewhere is not like always the best for you, and you can't really check off all the boxes. So as long as you do what you need to do and get through that first and still find ways to make the most out of it and develop, then taking the next step, um, it's can make those things that on the previous one that you may have stressed about or struggled with, and then on the next one, then you know what to ask for, you
Yep.
know what you need in order to maintain this, and this. And I think a lot of the time we're in position in a position to think like, okay, I don't want to ask for too much.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, this is like bare minimum things that we're asking for. So it's okay to ask and it's okay to like negotiate in those things. And then at this point, I did have an agent. So he was able to help me out with those things when it can sometimes be uncomfortable for you to negotiate that as a player.
Yeah.
Um, but it was a huge step forward for me playing wise and also financially. So there's many breaths of fresh air with that
Yeah.
move.
Yeah, that's amazing because, like you said, it's so true. A lot of this is kind of like with any other career, it's building a resume for yourself, right? And that first job coming out of college, that entry level gig it might not be everything that you hoped and dreamed. It's not going to necessarily be your dream job, and you might kind of have to pay your dues for a while. But it's a foot in the door. It's an opportunity, and then, like you said, the next time you can ask for a little bit more and a little bit more. And I know I feel that same way sometimes too, asking for that more, but it is, I don't know, sometimes I have to remind myself, like this is a business. It's not like we're in college soccer anymore and it's kind of all about the group and all about the team and the family and stuff like that. And it's as sad as it is. Like, if my club finds a player that's better than me that they can sign for cheaper tomorrow, like they'll probably do it. So I got to try and also do what's best for me in terms of my playing career, and my, like you said, the financial piece is part of it as well. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
and so then now Denmark and Norway and Sweden, like, can you talk to me about any of like the differences or similarities that you noticed in just all three of these kind of different places? Top level, I'm sure an elite level of football for all of them, but anything that you can really pinpoint as like this was similar or this was drastically different?
Yeah, I think so. In terms of how you play, I think is different. On my team in Sweden, we were a bottom table team. So, because of that, a lot of the time we're defending and we have to find ways to beat teams that are better than us.
Mm-hmm.
Bottom line, like they're going to come in, they're going to be better than us, but what can we do to set it up right to where we can still create chances for ourselves and get in to the next game or get some points, whether it's 1 point or 3 points? Like, what
Mm-hmm.
can we do within that? And how do we accept the times and face the adversity of the times that we don't get there? And I think I was on a team that was very, very good at facing adversity and doing those things that we had planned out going into it. When I moved into Norway, I moved to a team they had previously won the cup and they won the league. And they had a lot of changes within their team as well. So when I came in, we still had 5 new starters on the starting lineup. And the level itself was very like tight knit, like dinking it around, very quick, small spaces that these players are very, very good at. Um, and but the overall picture for a while, um, we struggled to find ways to get into the final third and make those chances successful, even though we could hold the ball for 90% of the game. We were still not finishing those chances and also losing it in unfortunate places to where we would get countered on. And that was like one of our weaknesses. But and then I think comparing the first two, Sweden and Norway, the level of the league in general, both of them were very high. Norway was a bit of a surprise in the league top to bottom, how much it had raised, because it was the same thing like when I was moving there in general. People would always say, like, yeah, the top 5 teams in Norway, they're really good. They can compete in the Swedish league, but the bottom 5 teams, like, there's a huge drop off. And then coming into the league, that just wasn't true. Like, top to bottom, the league was doing really well. And I think a lot of changes have happened during this summer break. So that's a little bit different now that the top teams are now shining through, but showing their money in sense of shining through.
Yeah.
They took some of the players from the bottom teams and brought them up. But still, like, overall, like, you still like have teams that are competing from the bottom with the top teams and getting a draw or getting a tie or getting a draw or getting a win or losing by 1 or something like that. Um, and then here, the top, so there's 8 teams in the top league. And I think the team that I play for is very similar to the team that I was playing for in Norway. We're very
Mm-hmm.
possessional, really good at holding the ball. I think we have a little bit easier of a time getting into that final third and finishing our opportunities. But the overall league, the bottom of the table is not as strong as the top.
Gotcha.
And so you have pretty much a clear distinction between the two, which can be a good thing and a bad thing, depending. I don't know how you look at it as a player, but yeah, I don't know. I think all of them, there's quality in all of the leagues, but I think the strongest one from top to bottom that I've played for was in Norway. And then Sweden was also very good top to bottom. The bottom like few teams are probably just not as strong as the top when you have like Rosengård who's beating people 8-9-0. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Because like I just imagine with all those countries being very similar in culture and in such close proximity that there would be definitely some similarities. So that's interesting to hear that there's definitely a lot of differences in the leagues as well. I do want to ask you about your time, like how the Portland opportunity came about, and being able to play in the NWSL, and like what that whole experience was like for you, and being able to play. I saw like you were able to come on, and like it looked like a pretty packed stadium. Like it looked like a pretty cool experience as a whole. Like how did that process come about, and what was it like going to play for Portland?
I mean, like the first thing to know is the fan culture is absolutely insane. Like that is like that's what you dream of when you think of playing professionally and wanting to be in front of a crowd and just be able to be in an environment where you know that what you're doing, like people care. um and how that came into play was after my season in Sweden, they had expressed interest, but that it's very rare for NWSL to buy a player out of their contract, especially an unproven player. I had a good season, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I've proved myself enough to be one of the players that's being purchased from a team in Europe.
Mhm.
And so they just basically wanted to follow along and see like how I continued to fare. And then coming up into the summer window with their national team players leaving for the World Cup, and one of them being Sophia Smith.
Wow.
So they wanted to bring in those specific positions. And most of the time they bring in national team replacement contracts because that's just signing someone on as a temporary contract during that window. Mine was a little bit different because it was a loan. So they had to still negotiate with the club that I was playing for and have that relationship like with the clubs where both of them were also rooting for me, which was I was very like fortunate to have as well.
Mm.
And they ended up figuring out a time that would suit both of them. I think it was a bit complicated because our season in Norway, our last game for before the World Cup was July 2nd, but the World Cup players left to go train and stuff on June 24th. So like there was that little window of like when are we going to can we do it before or can we do it after? Like yeah, so I was just kind of juggling wondering when I was going to leave. And also, paying attention to the next game. Because the environment you're in at the time is going to be like the most important.
Mm.
And then getting there and getting into the team, that was definitely a new experience for me. I haven't ever come into a team midway in anything. So and there's always that introductory stage. You're trying to figure out like how this style is, how this player likes to play, show them and communicate with them how you like to play.
Mm.
And so that was a bit of a transition getting there at first. And um, luckily, I was able to do enough to where I was able to get some time in. But even with that, like there wasn't really a lot that you could really do other than just get out there and play. You couldn't really think about like too many things during it. And I think like within that, there's still like room to develop, but it's very difficult
Mm.
because you're just there for a short amount of time. So you can't really do the same things. It's like set those long-term goals of like, okay, like this is what I want to work on going into like this, because like what you had is what you had. And if you were put out there, you just had to bring that to the table because you didn't have any time to really do anything else. And then I will say, when I first stepped out, like before the game during warm up, onto the field, it was like a home game that I first went to, and Portland fans are absolutely insane, like in a good way.
Yeah.
There's so many people, and that didn't really overwhelm me at first. But then like when you look up on the board and you just see NWSL, and then like all like the childhood memories had like triggered and been like, oh my God, I'm literally here right now. This is crazy.
Yeah.
And that's when I kind of like started getting those like pregame jitters, and I hadn't had pregame anxiety like that in a long time. But and then being like subbed in front of such a big crowd, and being able to play with some of the best players in the world, because there's a lot of players that are still there, that maybe they're not on the national team, but they're damn good players.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a crazy experience, and very, very grateful to be able to have that opportunity.
Yeah. And so when like that loan spell comes to an end, like is there like do you kind of get any feedback at all from the club in terms of like, hey, we might kind of want to keep an eye on you for next season or down the road or something like that, or like is that still a dream that you have at some point to play in the NWSL?
Yeah, definitely. I do want to come back to the US at some point and be able to play. I think I'm very fortunate to be out here, but I do miss home sometimes. And as much as I love being out here right now and I want to stay out here right now, I do in the future, if I have the opportunity to come back and play back home, then I want to take advantage of it, just in terms of it being the right time. Um,
Hmm.
and but with the feedback, the the coach, so Mike Norris is the coach there right now, and he was really, really good about doing exit meetings, with, because there was a couple other national team replacement players, and setting those up and just coming in and being able to give feedback of like your performance, how you did, what they see in the future, whether it's positive or negative. And they did say that they want to continue to follow and look into the future. So maybe, maybe it could be sooner than later that I come back to the US. But as of right now, I think that opportunity just opens up a little bit bigger, considering the expansions coming up
Yeah.
this coming next year. And so a lot of the NWSL teams are looking, and they're looking at a lot of the players that are playing overseas, just to so they can bring in players with professional experience versus relying on players coming out of college.
Hmm.
Um, but there was no guarantees attached to that, so it wasn't
Yeah.
yeah, like we're sticking with you. It was just more so it's like we want to continue to follow you. We want you to keep getting playing time, and developing in that way. And then if the time comes, then just know that we'll be watching. And so it's encouraging to hear that at the same time, and to be able to get um, those small things of feedback from such a short amount of time from a high quality coach. And so I'm able to take that in stride and apply it to whatever environment I end up being in.
Hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm sure that has to definitely be a motivating factor, and like you said, I'm sure an incredible experience to kind of achieve that milestone in your career. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I do like to ask kind of one question towards the end. Like I really like the idea of a player's career being a story, and like having these different chapters and these different highs and lows, and you've kind of laid out a lot of what the chapters have been to get you up to this point. And so I guess my question kind of is, what do you feel like in the story of your career is like the chapter that you're kind of in right now? What are some chapters that you're looking forward to write? And then, if somebody picks up the book, what do you want them to say about the book?
Oh, wow, those are some good questions. The chapter that I'm in right now, I think I'm in a bit of a reset right now, just getting back. There's been so many moving parts this past year that I feel like I'm in a place where I just need to keep taking one step forward and keep focusing on the little things, back to the basics,
Mm,
as I'm getting situated in not an uncomfortable place in a bad way, but just a new place.
yeah.
Um, and my chapter that I want to get to, I have always, I still like will have in the back of my mind that I want to um, get onto the national team spectrum, just to be noticed, to be, I know it's very difficult to it. And when I think about it now, I know that I'm not the type of player that I need to be in order to for someone to call my phone and say, "Hey, come in." But I I think I'm satisfied in the idea that even if I fall short of that because of the factors within my career that I am right now and my age and things like that, that I'm satisfied that even if I fall a bit short, at least I know that I've done everything I can in order to get to that point until at least
Yeah.
I feel that I'm in a place where I've peaked. Um, and then what was the last one?
So I like that the chapter in now and then what you hope to write. And then I guess maybe more so when you are at that point, like we spoke about before, when you look back and maybe you're ready to do something else and football's kind of that portion is done or that book is written. Like, what do you hope people will say about your career, or kind of what would they say about that book?
Maybe this would be, maybe it would be kind of conceited to say, but maybe not. I would hope that when people like go in and look at that book, that it would be more so of like a testimonial or something like to say or something like that. That like within each stage of my playing career, that I had come in and did everything that I could do and made like assisted the environment around me into being a better environment, and that it made it to where it was enjoyable to continue to kind of push through the blood and sweat and find that happiness within the sport, whatever that like may be. I think that's for me. I think that's a big part of it is knowing that um, you're in an environment where people love, appreciate, and care about you as a person as well as a player. And I hope
Mm,
that when people look back at it, they always kind of see that as like Alyssa was that player that not only did she just want to rise to the next level, but she wanted to bring everybody else with.
yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's amazing. Not just the player, but the person as well. Like, yes, what you do on the field is amazing, but also can you bring along the other people with you and bring them up to the top and rise with you? That's awesome. I want to thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's tough during a season with lots going on, so I can't thank you enough. I'm looking forward to seeing how everything goes this season and beyond that. It's definitely really grateful. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great, and I appreciate you reaching out.
That is it for myself and Alyssa this week. Thank you so much to her for stepping in the 11 and sharing her story. And yeah, it was a lot of fun talking to her and being able to learn a lot more about the professional game in places like Norway and Sweden and Denmark, which I've talked to players on the men's side, but I haven't been able to speak to many female players that have played over there. So greatly appreciative of her, of sharing her story. These are some of the last recordings that we have here in Australia. So like I asked you at the top, do me a big favor as a celebratory, send me on my way back to America. Can you please make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube? It helps the channel grow massively. It helps the podcast grow, and it helps us produce more content like this episode with Alyssa. So thank you to all of you out there who have done that. I appreciate it, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.